Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to try and untangle a really critical issue, something that shapes our cities: urban disinvestment.
It really does.
We've got some fascinating insights to share, mostly drawing from an academic piece called Countering Urban Disinvestment Through Community Building Initiatives. Our goal here is really just to cut through the jargon, give you a clear picture of what this is, where it came from historically, and maybe some ways communities are fighting back.
Yeah, exactly. And what we're looking at is a process with pretty significant real-world consequences, for cities everywhere.
Right.
So at its core, urban disinvestment is this gradual withdrawal. We're talking about lending institutions, other financial players, pulling investment out of specific neighborhoods.
It's not just market ups and downs then.
No, not usually. Often it's more systematic than that. It's like a draining of capital, and that leads directly to the physical decline, the deterioration you can see in some communities.
And one key tactic here, something people might have heard of, is redlining. Let's maybe break that down a bit.
Sure. So redlining was this really blatant discriminatory practice. Banks, insurance companies, they would literally draw red lines on maps.
Seriously, red lines.
Yeah, indicating neighborhoods, often, let's be clear, minority neighborhoods where they just wouldn't offer mortgages or insurance. Flat out refusal.
Okay, so maybe those literal red lines aren't on maps today, hopefully not, but does the idea persist?
Well, yes, that's the thing. The blatant stuff might be less common, but you see more subtle forms. Maybe much stricter loan terms in certain zip codes or higher interest rates, things that effectively achieve a similar outcome.
And what's so damaging about that, beyond just not getting a loan?
Oh, it's insidious. It's not just the immediate denial. It systematically stripped wealth-building opportunities. Think about it. Home ownership is like the main way most families build equity, right?
Right. Generational wealth. Often.
Yeah, exactly. So denying access created this cycle of disadvantage. Really, really hard to break out of. And the consequences just ripple out.
Like what?
Well, the lack of investment leads to buildings deteriorating, infrastructure crumbling. Then that decay discourages any new investment. Property values tank.
And the people living there.
They bear the brunt. It hits their health outcomes, their job prospects, just the overall vitality of the place they call home. It's a downward spiral.
Okay, so to really get how this became such a mess and maybe how to fix it, we need to look back a bit at the thinking behind neighborhood change.
Yeah, that's important context.
There was this National Commission on Neighborhoods back in '79. They made a really sharp point. Neighborhood decline isn't always just natural. Sometimes it's a direct result of, deliberate policies or actions.
Right. It's not always just the way things are. And it's interesting to look at the early theories trying to explain this, like the invasion succession theory, Hoyt, back in 1939. It basically pictured this natural cycle. New residents, often lower income, move in.
Okay. This invasion, as they termed it, triggers the original population to move out the succession. And eventually, the theory went, the area declines, almost like a biological process.
Invasion succession.
Yeah.
Sounds a bit loaded.
It does, and it got criticized for being way too simplistic, maybe having some built-in biases, suggesting decline is inevitable when certain groups move in.
So it was missing something.
Definitely. And that's where Babcock comes in, even earlier, 1932. He added a really crucial piece.
Which was?
He stressed that racial and ethnic change was a huge driver of neighborhood decline. He really highlighted the discriminatory stuff that the other theory kind of glossed over.
Ah, okay, so he brought race into the picture explicitly.
Right, and Babcock's point really shows how tangled up race and discrimination have been with this whole disinvestment thing. It wasn't just happening around lending practices. Lending practices were fueling it.
You mentioned the FHA earlier.
Oh.
The Federal Housing Administration?
Yeah. So the FHA, ironically, while set up to help people buy homes, its early policies actually made the problem worse. How?
They used racially segregated maps to decide who got mortgage underwriting. They essentially put redlining into practice, making it super hard for folks in minority neighborhoods to get loans.
So government policy was reinforcing it.
In those early days, absolutely. And this wasn't just ancient history. Research kept showing up. Even into the 1990s, scholars like Galster, LaCour, Little, Squires, they found evidence that this discrimination still impacted lending and property values in minority areas decades later. The legacy was long.
Wow. Decades later.
Yeah. There's a really stark study from the Boston Fed in '92.
What did it find?
A huge difference in mortgage denial rates. Black and Hispanic applicants were denied way more often than white applicants.
But maybe there were financial reasons. Credit scores, income.
They controlled for that. Even after accounting for all those financial factors, the gap remained. The data strongly suggested bias was still at play in lending decisions.
That persistence really underscores why policy intervention was needed, right?
Absolutely. Which brings us to things like the Community Reinvestment Act, the CRA.
Okay, tell us about the CRA.
Passed in the late 70s. The main idea was to push banks to meet the credit needs of all parts of their communities, especially those low and moderate income neighborhoods that got hit hardest by disinvestment.
So it's like telling banks, you operate here, you need to lend here.
Pretty much. It sets benchmarks for lending, investments, services in all areas, focusing on those historically underserved ones. Regulators are supposed to check how banks are doing.
Supposed to. Sounds like there might be some debate about how well it works.
Oh, for sure. The CRA provides the framework, but enforcement, effectiveness, that's been argued about a lot. Community groups often felt the regulators weren't tough enough, that banks weren't really held accountable sometimes.
Oh, mixed results.
You could say that. There were delays in seeing actual reinvestment on the ground. But we should also acknowledge quite a bit of reinvestment did happen because of the CRA. If you look at the mid-'80s, the '90s, cities like Chicago, Cleveland, Boston, Detroit, they saw billions, literally billions, channeled into targeted neighborhoods through CRA agreements. That's a lot of capital aimed at turning things around.
Okay, so federal policy is one piece. What about stuff happening more locally, from the ground up?
Right, that's crucial too. And that leads us to community development corporations, or CDCs.
CDCs, okay.
These really grew out of communities themselves. They became these vital tools for revitalization, focused squarely on what the residents actually needed and wanted.
So run by locals, for locals, kind of.
Often, yeah. Or at least deeply embedded in the community. And what makes them effective is they tend to look at the whole picture.
How so?
Well, someone named Sullivan wrote about this in '93. He said for CDCs to really work, they couldn't just build houses. They had to address the social stuff, too.
Right.
Like the ethnic mix of the neighborhood, people's attitudes, how folks interact, who holds power, all that complex social fabric. You need to work with that to get lasting change.
That makes sense. It's not just bricks and mortar.
Exactly. It's rebuilding the social and economic base. That's why CDCs often do a bit of everything.
Such as?
Countering Urban Disinvestment Through Community Building. This excerpt from Countering Urban Disinvestment Through Community Building Initiatives examines the historical context of urban disinvestment, particularly focusing on the discriminatory practice of redlining and its detrimental effects on neighborhoods. The text traces the evolution of policies and community-based strategies aimed at reversing this trend, highlighting federal initiatives and the role of community development corporations. Furthermore, it discusses various theories and research findings related to neighborhood decline and the effectiveness of different intervention approaches, including comprehensive, place-based strategies and those that leverage community assets. The author also explores the challenges and complexities of addressing disinvestment and promoting sustainable community development. How many community building initiatives mentioned in the document, and summarized hereafter with 3 typical ones? The document mentions several community building initiatives and strategies aimed at countering urban disinvestment. While it doesn't provide a single numbered list, we can identify various approaches and federally funded programs discussed as community building efforts. Here are some of the community building initiatives and approaches mentioned in the document. 1. Community Development Corporations. CDCs, these are identified as major community building organizations formed since the 1960s, utilizing the CRA as a tool to revitalize communities. CDCs use housing development programs and commercial revitalization initiatives and attempt to control the composition of the residents through housing selection and eviction policies. Property management and the provision of social services are also part of their work. 2. Place-based strategies with special emphasis on housing and economic development, including physical, economic, individual, institutional, and political dimensions. These strategies aim to link place-based and people-based strategies. These strategies that are comprehensive and integrated, tailor to the individual neighborhood, focus on a manageable size, begin with neighborhood needs, involve residents and local stakeholders, and consider goals and shaping plans accordingly. Strategies that build on a neighborhood's inventory of assets, including physical resources, human capital, and organizational capacity, resident involvement and control in the development process. 3. Recent federal initiatives integrating place-based and people-based support, focusing on social work practice in areas like economic development, housing, family development, and job creation. 4. The Empowerment Zone program, funded after a call for reinvestment in distressed urban and rural communities, aiming for job growth and economic opportunity through strategic plans integrating various sectors. 5. Hope 6. The 1993 Urban Revitalization Demonstration Project, Hope 6, designed to transform distressed public housing into well-functioning, supportive communities through physical redevelopment and attention to residents' self-sufficiency and independence. It's challenging to give a precise number of community-building initiatives, as the document discusses broader approaches and specific programs. However, we can summarize 3 typical types of community-building initiatives highlighted. 1. Comprehensive, place-based initiatives. These initiatives focus on a specific geographic area and aim to address a wide range of interconnected problems. They emphasize the importance of understanding the local context and tailoring strategies to unique needs and assets of a neighborhood. Such initiatives strive for integration across various dimensions like physical development, economic opportunity, social well-being, and institutional capacity. They also prioritize the involvement of residents and local stakeholders in the planning and implementation process. 2. Community Development Corporations. CDCs are nonprofit organizations that play a significant role in community building by undertaking housing development, commercial revitalization, and providing social services. They often aim to revitalize disinvested areas by developing affordable housing, creating job opportunities, and improving the overall quality of life for residents. CDCs often leverage funding and partnerships from various sources, including government programs and private investment, to achieve their goals. 3. Federal government-led programs. The document highlights several federal initiatives, like the Empowerment Zone program and Hope 6. These programs represent a top-down approach to community building, providing funding and guidance to address distressed communities. The Empowerment Zone program encourages strategic, integrated planning for economic and social development, while Hope 6 focuses on transforming distressed public housing into sustainable and supportive communities through mixed-income housing and resident support services. These programs often emphasize a combination of physical improvements and human capital development. How many types of neighborhoods are in terms of their condition? Based on the information in the sources, the Hoyt-Babcock model describes 5 stages of neighborhood condition. 1. Healthy. 2. Incipient decline. 3. Clearly declining. 4. Accelerated decline. 5. Abandoned. This model outlines a progression of neighborhood change over time. So, what neighborhoods really means? Based on the sources, the term neighborhoods refers to specific geographic areas or communities within urban settings that are subject to various economic and social forces. These areas are characterized by their physical condition. Neighborhoods can experience physical deterioration due to lack of investment and aging infrastructure. This can progress through stages of decline, eventually leading to abandonment. Demographic composition. The racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic makeup of a neighborhood is a significant factor influencing its condition and vulnerability to disinvestment. Shifts in demographics can be linked to neighborhood decline. Economic stability. Neighborhoods can face disinvestment, characterized by withdrawal of investment by lending institutions, redlining, leading to a decline in housing stock, businesses, and overall economic opportunity. Conversely, community building initiatives aim to foster economic development and revitalization within these areas. Social dynamics. Neighborhoods are also defined by their social structures, including community organizations, social networks, and the quality of life experienced by residents. Community building efforts often focus on strengthening these social dimensions. In essence, the sources treat neighborhoods as distinct spatial units that are impacted by interconnected physical, economic, and social factors, making the target of community building and anti-disinvestment strategies. The condition of a neighborhood can range from healthy to abandoned, reflecting a dynamic process of change over time.